Well, I would be interested to hear that, and if that is, I mean, it looks like some work needs to be done about whether that's needed or not, but if it
Sure.
is, we certainly need to reflect numbers in the budget for next year.
Sure.
Thank you.
That'd be another example of like coming out of contingency,
yeah.
you know?
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Just confirm, the excess EDST funds, that's estimates, right? In addition, that's not included in the contingency?
Correct,
Correct.
it is not.
That's all I had, thanks.
Any other questions for Alderman Gould?
So as it relates to the project descriptions, you said you added in the destination playground and water play. The funding for the design work has already been spent, right? That there's no proposed funding for any additional design work. So the only budget item, but you're not really budgeting for other than potential contingency, is construction if we move forward.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the design costs were incurred in '21, and that is already part of that '21 budget year.
So when you say design will be complete in your explanation, you know, that's not being complete because of funding that we're going to need to spend for 2022. It's just,
Yeah, it's just the
Previous
nature of
funding.
schedule. You know, the design's gonna be completed in spring of '22.
yeah, we may want to just note that in there and just kind of note that design funding was from 2021, just so in case
Sure,
public is curious.
sure. Let me see if I put that.
You had 2022 anticipated key activities.
Okay.
Design will be completed. I think we
Sure.
just need to clarify that it's using funds from, that have already been.
Okay, that's easy enough.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thanks, Greg.
Great, thank you.
Who's up next?
I'm told that Major Hawkins will be doing the PowerPoint?
Physically operated.
Oh, operating it. Okay, sorry. This is page, looking for the. 141? 131, okay.
Tab 11.
132.
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. For the police department and our budget for 2022, we did a very brief PowerPoint presentation, and Angie's going to take us through it real quickly. Go ahead, Angie. Starting off with a mission statement for the department for 2022. I'm not going to read these to you, folks. You guys can see that. Moving on to the next slide for goals for 2022, there's a couple things that I wanted to mention or speak to briefly. The officer wellness program is something that the fire department really was a model for us coming out of the Brentwood Fire Department and from law enforcement nationwide. This is a move that I think is really needed. There's different components of this wellness program, and I compliment Angie. She put a ton of time and research into this. Really, it's a physical wellness program as well as a mental health well-being program. The big ticket item on this is the cost to the testing of the officers. So as you look at how that $30,000 spend breaks down, that's really the biggest cost, is the healthcare providers that do testing on officers going through the program. The license plate reader costs that you see or the goals that you see are part of the flock cameras that were approved by the Board of Aldermen recently. They are equipped with license plate readers. The third one, the succession plan, is something we've worked on in 2021. Just as an example, Angie's the Bureau of Community Policing Major Jim McIntyre, who's instilled with all of the institutional knowledge and proficiency at the administrative side. That's just an example of the succession program that we're going through as we move forward. So, and that goes to our detectives, that goes to our training program. So that's all part of the goals as we move into 22 and really each year as we have a succession plan for the police department. We've talked length with BOLA about reestablishing the ranks within the police department. We would like to get to the point where the rank of lieutenant is reinstituted for the line platoons as a watch commander. That's very typical of law enforcement. The corporal rank is pretty extinct in our business. We have, at BOLA's request, and with the help of Jason Coates, we have rewritten the job descriptions as thoroughly as we can, and we hope now moving forward with those job descriptions that we'll get approval to go to lieutenants and sergeants away from sergeants and corporals going into 22. Next screen, Nancy. 2021 accomplishments, you'll see on there the officer training program continues to be front and center in the Brentwood Police Department in terms of our priorities. There's so many ways that program helps us as it goes to the manner in which our officers police the streets of Brentwood. So that's top on the list for a reason in terms of accomplishments, and will be prioritized as we move forward. We received approval from the board for the 29th officer. Officer Alex Wilcox recently started in a retail and traffic position. So going into 22, we will work with Alex as we kind of shape that job and the parameters that we think are going to be most resourceful and best for the department. The last one on that list, and I think a special recognition is to Major McIntyre on his continued work in the CALIA certification for the police department. As you see the issues with law enforcement over the last few years, this is a very important part of being as professional as possible in our profession at this point. Jim has done the lion's share work in this, and he and Kevin Botcher have done a great job getting us compliant. But as you all heard, this is an ongoing process that goes yearly, and we are due soon for recertification, so they're preparing for that as well. Next. The next couple slides are just, BOLA asked that we include some information for you that kind of separates the differences in the budget this year, that so we can highlight them a little bit for you. The first one is the one I spoke to, the assistance program. $30,000 is really the contractual agreements that we have with SSM. Again, very similar to what the fire department has. Ours is a little less costly because they have more stringent expectations in terms of their testing process. So ours ended up being a little less expensive than theirs did. But these, all of these checks, that's one of the things that we asked for in the budget and was approved by the city administrator. We also asked, next slide, that we reinstitute an educational benefit. We have 4 officers who have indicated that they want to continue their education. As I think that you're probably aware, there are requirements to be promoted within our department now in terms of having degrees in order to be eligible to even be promoted. So as part of that process, we're asking for $12,000. That's $3,000 per officer is the maximum on that. The next slide is a reduction slide, and we had to give a little to get a little. So here you will see that there's a reduction of our overtime cost of $18,000. And again, that the officer wellness program ask was really kind of where we were trying to shove into the budget, the extra cost to that. So there's a reduction, and we will be challenged to manage our overtime well next year. So we will stay on top of it to do that. The next slide is also one that was taken out of a request that we had, and that is a request for surveillance cameras for Brentwood Park. And I think one of the things that you might question on this is why would we put surveillance cameras in Brentwood Park at this point with Brentwood bound in progress? But the companies that we have talked to about surveillance cameras assured us that those are transferable to any different area that we wanted them to go to. So had we gone to contract, that's been taken out of the budget for this year, but should we go to contract in 2022 for park surveillance cameras, they can later be repositioned as needed if we need to do that. And I think Alderman Parker Tesh, you asked about the lighting of the tunnel. That's just an example of an area where a camera would probably be very beneficial. The next screen is titled Asset Forfeiture. As you know, there is a relatively small amount of money left still. We do not have officers assigned to federal task forces, so this money funding source is pretty much dried up, but there's still money in this account. It's very specific on what and how we can spend that money. The federal government gives us parameters that we can spend the money on. Robin asked that, or directed through, when she took her job as finance director, that we set up funding within our asset forfeiture so that if we do need to spend money, there'll be money assigned to certain categories. So that's really what we've done. Training is an example. Should we need additional money for training, we can take it out of there. That's an approved area for the federal government out of this money. So this screen just indicates that as you look at the budget for the police department, you will see on the line items down in the last part of our list, the 221 budget codes are all the asset forfeiture codes. The last slide was one of the things that we had requested was an ATV. This is really looking more toward Brentwood bound as that area comes online at the end of '22, to have an ATV for an officer to be able to operate in all of our parks, but especially as you look at the areas, the beautiful things that are being done down there, it would be nice to be able to have an officer have an ATV available. It's not available. It's not asked for in this budget. Potentially, we can find money on an additional source for that, but that's what really the purpose of that ATV would have been. That's it, isn't it, Angie? I'm going to touch on our capital items real quickly. There's not much here. The bullet-resistant vests for the law enforcement expire after 5 years. 5 years, a little over 5 years ago, we Brentwood made a purchase of a bunch of vests, which are all coming into that 5-year window. They need to be replaced. That's on the capital item for $15,300. At this point, the 18 of those vests need to be replaced. So this is an ask in capital for that cost. The rest of the vests will come, they will transition maybe 1 or 2 a year thereafter, because we have hired officers in those 5-year period, then their vests won't expire. So as they expire, we would need to replace them. But this is a big ticket item this time because vests were purchased a little over 5 years ago as a en masse, so to speak, and they're expiring. As we looked for the 4 Dodge Durango Pursuit SUV vehicles for law enforcement, we're continuing to rack up a lot of miles on our cars. I mean, we will be well over 75,000 miles on the cars we replace, which is even beyond the recommendation for replacement for vehicles. So we've got a couple that are already showing age. They're starting to, one was in the shop for over a week last week with issues. So replacing these police vehicles is important, and we have 2 command vehicles this year that are old, need to be replaced, and 2 marked cars. The last ticket item is it's just another Motorola radio for one of the command cars. I can go through the line item requests if you'd like me to, or if it's easier, if you have questions on anything off the line item request, or Alderwoman Sims, how would you like me to do that?
I
Doesn't matter.
open forum questions as we have them. If you don't have questions, that's fine. Alderman Gould.
I think you skipped over potentially one of the expenditures or expenses, or maybe I missed it, I don't know, the cameras at the police department.
Yes, sir.
Are those still being requested?
They were requested and taken out as part of the budget reduction
they were
process.
reduced?
No, they're in there.
Okay, yeah, I'm
Maybe I
confused by
missed
some of the slides that were reductions, but not, are they in there or not in
Right,
there?
so the cameras at the police department, I don't remember exactly where is it behind the building? That's still in the capital budget, and, so that's the only item he didn't mention that's still in there. And another item that was requested that was removed is the pergola also.
Okay.
So those are the 2.
Got it. And I know there was some, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think the confusion was the Brentwood Park cameras were what was explained in this slide. I think that was the confusion.
As a removal,
Exactly.
correct, okay. But
Sorry
the
for that.
police department cameras, I know when I first went through this last year, there was some discussion about the police department potentially moving and, you know, where are we standing in that?
I think those were just discussions, I want to say by the board. I don't know if the chief, did you weigh in
Okay.
on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you, on moving? Moving the police department somewhere else?
No, ma'am.
To City Hall?
Wouldn't be my recommendation. We have a very nice building, and it's very comfortable.
Wonderful, all right,
I don't think
great.
it's worth the money, the cost to move anywhere,
Right.
to be honest
I
with
think there's a desire by some that maybe we can all be in the same space eventually. And that was it.
Okay, no, that's great. I mean, I think the cameras on the police department's important. Thank you.
Roman Tice?
I always have questions. So first of all, I applaud the money that you're spending for the health of our officers and for the education of our officers. And then as a child, I have a son who's really into jujitsu, and so I even brought this up with him, and he was really excited that was.
Maybe you can come teach us, ma'am.
Well, he's not that. He just started about 6 months ago, but anyway, he can't stop talking about it. So, and then the other question I have is sort of a silly one, but the petrol products, you have that line item going down. Is the gas mileage better on the new cars? Because cost of gas is going up. So,
We do get a little better gas mileage, although all of us know that the price of gas at the pump keeps going up. So we will be right at around that 48 mark this year.
okay, well, then
So
that's probably reasonable.
you know,
Okay.
There's a couple of things in our budget that are moving targets. One of them is the ECDC costs, and Bola knows this well. The Board of Directors changes the manner in which they charge cities occasionally, and that causes our costs to come up and down quickly. So projecting that into 2022 was a bit of a challenge. It is every year for us because it changes, so. And at this point, we plotted out $390,000 for the dispatching of ECDC and the services that they give us. Quite frankly, I think that's gonna be a little high. I'm hoping that it is.
It'll be less, and that's based on calls for service. So if the different types of calls for service that we track goes higher, that's factored into the calculation. I think we're rather lucky this year because we had the contract policing, and we were the one department that used it a lot. When you count all the usage for the other member cities, it totaled 25 calls for service. Ours was like 25,000. And so because contract policing was deemed free, the other members thought it would not be good to add that into the calculation and bill Brentwood for it. So if seeing our costs going up high, it could have gone significantly higher. But because we thought it was a free service, ECDC Board of Directors did not decide to charge us for it. But as always, it's based on calls for service, how much we use it or less.
So then another question, in the account descriptions and the salaries, provides funds for crossing guards. Do the crossing guards come out of the police budget?
I do, yes.
So even like the school crossing guards?
Yes.
Or,
They
Or
reimburse the city,
Oh,
and it
okay.
goes against that account.
okay, but this, we are reimbursed
Yeah.
from the school board. Okay,
Yes.
okay,
Yes, they do
sorry.
reimburse us,
Okay.
but it comes out of our budget.
So, and I just, for the record, Chief just mentioned, we're spending a lot of money on Brentwood Bound, and we're making it beautiful, but we also need to be sure it's safe, whether it's lighting or if cameras are deemed necessary or whatever. I mean, I think, I don't want to judge whether that's necessary or not, but I do think it's critically important that people feel safe going to that huge park. So, thank you.
Other questions? All right, seeing none. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chief. Or do you? Oh, Alderman Lockmueller, I'm putting you on the spot. Do you have, if you had any questions, I'd have. You're obscured from my view with the podium. I didn't see you there.
Next is
And
Parks and Recreation, Eric Grenenfelder.
Quickly, I can get this on.
181, 180.
There we go. All right, so try to get through this fairly quickly. Do kind of, again, like everyone else, a high-level overview, so if there are specific questions, please feel free to ask. Just a couple things about what we did in 2021. Again, we were a busy year for us as we try to kind of rebound from a pandemic. Some things that we were proud of is putting together the Backyard Bash, installing the 2 EV pedal charging stations at the rec center. We did multiple storm cleanups after some very severe storms this year. Helped with the coordinating of the composting program. So Dan ordered the composters. We took the registrations, did the program, and helped out with that. And then we also have launched our online registration website. So those are a couple things that we did this year. Next year, we're focusing on Brentwood Bound. A lot of my time, a lot of my staff's time will be ready to make sure that in 2023 we are raring to go with the opening of Brentwood Park. So that's something that we'll be working a lot on. Events, grand opening, sort of ribbon cutting type event, different things we'll do throughout the year, how we transfer some events over to that park, continue to coordinate with the maintenance of the park and making sure we're ready for all that stuff. So we'll do that. We continue to kind of rebuild programming, and then our department will focus a lot on sustainability. I'll be kind of the spearhead staff person with the Sustainability Commission as we finish up the sustainability plan. Obviously, there will be some parks and recreation items encompassed in that, and so we'll want to make sure that we're looking at that moving on in the future. So just a quick conversation about our budget and the fund. So what we talk about is the Stormwater and Parks Improvement Fund. So it is the revenue, expenditures, and capital for the Parks and Recreation Department. Also includes funding for stormwater projects. Typically, those don't get identified at this time, but we just have kind of funding there. We used it a couple of years ago for the culvert replacement in high school. We're using it this year for the design of the Storm Creek repair in Brentwood Sports Complex. And then once we get the stormwater management plan done, we'll see hopefully a lot of usage of figuring out what we're going to do and how we're going to budget for those things as we correct things in the stormwater management plan. It's been confusing the last few years, as Craig talked about. It's really interesting to see, $80 million of revenue and expenditures coming out of Fund 50. Makes my job a little bit more fun to kind of make sure that I'm on track. But hopefully in 2023, 24, we'll start getting back to a normal Fund 50 balance. Again, not complaining. It's going to be a wonderful project, and love to have it. It's just kind of been fun. So, the budget philosophy, as far as the Parks and Recreation Department goes, is to finish each year with a sizable fund balance. We want to continue to increase our fund balance every year, and that's kind of what this slide's depicting. It's something that Bola asked me to do when I got here, and we've been able to use cash funding for a lot of projects. So we cash fund $2 million on the Brentwood Recreation Complex based on the fact that we're able to build fund balance. We also started setting aside money for the stormwater projects. We had built that up to $500,000, $500,000, which we used to start Brentwood Bound before we had the COPs approved. So that's kind of what we do and how we're kind of handling it. So that's one of the things that we're happy to do. A couple revenue highlights. I know we kind of talk about a lot of things, but the revenue, so the big things is, again, we continue to recover from the pandemic. We still haven't hit kind of our normal monthly meeting room rental revenue. People are still kind of slow coming in. What we're starting to see, the baby showers, those type of things come back on the weekends. We're starting to see BNI and some of our daytime groups come back. So we think we'll be in a better shape in a year or two. Sports, again, is one of those things where it was tough to start off this year, especially sand volleyball. We saw a hit in that because a lot of sand volleyball registrations were corporate sponsored. So we saw a lot of loss of those teams, and they're talking already about next year. They've seen our new courts, they want to come back. And then the rink, we're seeing just people starting to come back and skate some more. And so that and programming, we're trying to see rink fees is the program aspect. So we're starting to see people, the learn to skate program is doing really well. We talk about rink fees completely returning pre-pandemic is primarily the Brentwood Hockey League. The BHL has taken on some competition with Maryville and Centene. We can't compete with Sugar Fire in a bar in-house. We'd like to. It's just impossible. So we've lost some teams out because, you can go get some barbecue, then you have some beers, you play hockey, then you have more beers. And we don't allow them to do that in our place. So we're losing teams for some of that. But what we're hoping is to get kind of back to pre-pandemic levels in 23. So you see we're pretty darn close in fees and charges coming back to 22. We're almost there. We talked last year about wanting to be there by 2023, and we think we'll be there by 2023. So staff is encouraged. We're excited about what we're doing. And again, also opening up Brentwood Park will be a big boost for us as well. So, and again, what this is just fees and charges. So we bring about $1 million, over $1 million a year in just fees and charges, what people pay us to do within the Parks and Recreation Department. So expenditures, again, some highlights. For the most part, everything's pretty much online. There might be some small things here and there. The big things is personnel. You see that 8% increase for part-time staff pay. And the two big things is minimum wage, again, increases from $10.30 an hour to $11.15. And it's been creeping up the past couple of years. It'll go up again next year in 23 is the final, I think the final increase. And so when your skate guards are making $11.50 an hour, we see compression with our building managers who are higher level. So we've been working on that, worked with the HR manager, and we found a new sort of part-time salary schedule that we think is fair and competitive. And again, we're facing the same situation everyone else is in the city is, we cannot find part-time staff, and paying them $10.55 an hour just wasn't cutting it. So we're starting to hopefully fill in some of those gaps. So we'll hopefully be able to do that. You'll see the increase in operational expenditures in 2023, and that is Brentwood Bound. That's what we've talked about in all the Board of Alderman meetings, what we expect the cost to be for Brentwood Bound. I think it'll give us, take us 2 to 3 years so we actually know what that cost is going to be, what it's going to take us to run that facility like that every year, but we at least have it programmed in 23 to see what it is. The good news in all that is that we also pay off our COP for the Brentwood Recreation Complex. So that gets paid off in 24. So you see kind of that lower gap, that previous slide where revenues and expenditures were getting darn close, and that a lot of that is because of the COP, and once we added the additional expenditures in Brentwood Bound. Now that COP is all out, we'll have some additional funding to boom other places. So. Capital, just a couple of things about the CIP, because I know Alderman Shelton, you're new, and some people, it's just good of a refresher. So we actually run our own CIP plan for the department. We have 80+ projects and pieces of equipment. So we include things like mowers and things like that in our CIP. And basically what it does, it outlines our infrastructure and improvement needs, and it really helps us with planning. So we evaluate scores of every project every year. So we have a ranking system. Some things is if there's a need or if there's a timing issue. And a good example is when we talk about this year, the Hanley Park Pavilion and then the parking lot. So the parking lot and the pavilion are two separate projects, but we're going to be tearing up that section where the new parking lot would go. We'll save some money if we're able to kind of do that all in one larger project. So that's why we make that recommendation, and it kind of moves up in that capital improvement a little bit. It's always been focused on, currently to replace current facilities because those are the ones that are, to be honest, failing a little bit more. And for those who don't know, when the city did a big bond in 1993 and did a lot, when you see kind of our typical pavilion structures, those TP structures, those were all put in 1 year. And so we see 20 years later, they're starting to not do as well. And to be honest, they were kind of just a pop in place type thing and don't last that long as well. And so we're starting to see those needs come through, which is why we've been focusing on those type of replacements. And I know, Alderman Gould, you made a comment about something, and I think it's a good comment, and is how do we kind of structure projects? And a lot of times when we think about that timing aspect I talked about, it is kind of dependent on what's been going on in parks. So our first big need when I got here was Oak Tree Park. The playground there was literally falling down, and so we replaced that. And then we spent the next couple of years really getting Oak Tree Park, for the most part, what we think done. There's still some work we need to do, especially in the natural areas. But again, we feel like that park came a long way in those 5 years. And now you kind of see the same thing happening in Hanley. So the real big next thing was the sports complex-ish area. And because of that, that just shows the need for the bathroom and additional parking, and then we kind of get through that. And then, we might turn to Memorial and start kind of doing more things at Memorial. So there are times where we need to piecemeal some things. Brentwood Sports Complex is a good example because that's hard to do that whole place at one time, especially with the flooding and water issues we have down there. But we try to kind of take a holistic approach, especially as we look at parks. So the other thing we're trying to do, which we'll talk about, is spreading out the equipment need for Brentwood Park kind of over the next couple of years, so we don't do it all in 1 year, so we don't have a big lunk of capital for equipment all in 1 year. And it helps kind of spreading that out so we can do more projects. In addition, it also helps when the replacement program, when it comes back, so each has a 4 to 6 year cycle, so we're not doing it all again in 4 to 6 years at the same time. We're trying to spread it out a little bit. So it's a little bit on our capital program. Just a couple ones that we're going to highlight, which is the Storm Creek and Creek Bank. We talked about that a little bit earlier this year. We've noticed that is kind of, it's not the greatest picture, but that is the hole that goes from Deer Creek into the Brentwood parking lot, Brentwood Sports Complex parking lot. It is important for us to get that filled so it keeps Deer Creek from overflowing into the parking lot. In the past June, the Board of Aldermen approved a proposal from the on-call engineer, Horner and Schiffer, to design the bid documents this year, and then the idea is to complete it next year. Hanley Comfort Station and parking lot, again, we just kind of talked about this. This is kind of the first draft of things we'll talk about. We'll bring it to Public Works here in the next couple months. But the idea is to kind of we have a restroom facility and a pavilion. Again, both of those are kind of starting to fail. The restroom facility more so. We have some piping issue. It's also not ADA accessible. So once we touch something, we're gonna have to replace it anyway. We can put both of them together in one facility, kind of incorporate it into the sports complex a little bit more, and then that gives us that room on the other side to add some additional parking, which is very needed for that area, especially with the dog park on the other side as well. And a couple of small park maintenance things. The bunker cart is something we actually use in our sports complex. It's what gets the ball fields up and running every year. So that's in need of replacement. The electric mower is one of we're on a 4-year replacement cycle for mowers. We'll have 4 mowers, possibly a 5th with Brentwood Bound. We're going to see how that goes, and that way we're going to be replacing them once a year. The electric is kind of our sort of foray into the sustainability, making sure that the city looks at sustainable features. Not only is it sustainable, but it also reduces a lot of the maintenance concerns because it's all run through electric. It's really just the blades needing sharpening. So that's going to be beneficial for us, and even Dan's staff sometimes have to look at stuff on our mowers. The mower this is replacing was down most of the year. So utility vehicle, again, I know Alderman Gould, you asked about that. We have a couple side-by-sides right now that are bigger, encased, and they have the doors. I don't know if you've seen them during like Brentwood Backyard Bash or Brentwood Days, things like that. The utility vehicles are actually better for turf. It doesn't do as much damage on the turf. It spreads out the weight, distributes the weight a little bit better. And so staff would like to see us sort of going to this. It's also better on trails. So we'd like to start seeing more of these type vehicles throughout the park system instead of the side-by-sides or even the larger trucks. We'll still need trucks. We'll have the mowing crew. We'll have a capital, like a project crew that needs trucks, but hopefully we might be able to reduce some of that fleet in a little bit. And then the Public Works and Parks and Public Works garage design, that was in the budget for this year. We didn't get to, I know there's been some questions, and so we were asked to kind of split 2 fiscal years on it. So the idea is maybe start 4th quarter of next year and go in the following year. So that's why you kind of see $55,000 for this year for both us and Dan, and you'll see $55,000 again next year for us and in Public Works. So that's kind of a quick thing on capital. Last thing is really not part of our budget, but something I think is important to kind of talk about, which is something I've talked about before during the beginning of Brentwood Bound and kind of continued it, which is the idea of an endowment fund. And I think you guys all understand what endowment funds are. It's basically you put in some principal and then you start working with the interest for doing things. And you see that a lot in schools during capital campaigns or for their buildings and things like that. Grants is another big one. And, when I was in Clayton, we started looking at that a lot for some of the projects we were doing in Clayton, mainly because it's great that we're going to have this beautiful new 32 acres of park. It's going to take some capital and some expenditures to maintain it, especially at the level we want to maintain it at. And a way to do it is to kind of start this endowment fund. One of the suggestions from staff is maybe we contribute a portion of the excess ESDT to a fund specifically for Brentwood Park. Hopefully increase that fund for the next few years as we get ready. And then hopefully at the time we start looking at capital or those larger contractual expenditures that we're going to need help with, like dredging the lake, we'll have money set aside already, and it won't be a burden on future budgets. So again, just something for food for thought. Just a very short introduction to that topic that we can take up a much larger time. That's my presentation for now. Happy to answer any additional questions.
And since we just got the responses to my questions, sorry, they were right before the meeting anyway. I haven't really read through all of your responses. I might have some follow-up questions after
please,
that.
anytime.
So don't take my silence as no more questions.
Plenty of time to ask questions now and even when we get to the board, so I understand that.
Alderwoman Tyson.
Well, I'll ask questions. So what are you doing so great with the fitness that?
That was actually one of Alderman Gould's questions.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay. See, I
Yeah, it
haven't.
is. No, and I'm happy to talk about it. One of the things that we started this year is because we are a non-traditional fitness facility, obviously. We don't have fitness rooms, we don't have nice weights and things that we can do around with. But what staff looked into and what we're trying to start at the end of this year was something called video or fitness on demand. So it's basically virtual fitness. And what we see as a benefit to this is not only can we run classes without instructors, but also we could sell yearly, monthly memberships for the program for people who can't get to the rec center, who can take classes at home. We'll start to see a lot more on the marketing side of that once we hire a new marketing manager.
And you talked about the ice rink, and you were concerned about it coming back, but then your numbers are a big jump from.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at compared to last year, you'll see that increase. And when I was talking about coming back, it's just one line, the fitness fees, the rink fees. And that's where the BHL revenue comes in. The rental fee, we continue to think will increase. We think we're still a nice market. We're still centrally located. There's still tons of hockey teams. So the daily admissions we see increasing. So it's really just getting back to pre-pandemic levels. The only one we are worried about right now is the rink fees because of the BHL. They'll all be better than last year.
And then I have a question on the it's the 709 section, the Fund 50 709 categories on page 193. So what are these capital expenses? Why did we budget 3.2 this year? Why are we estimated to spend only 1.2 million? I mean, what is this?
Well, the big one is what was budgeted is the $1.6 million in interest for the Brentwood bound cops. And from what I understand, that got moved to the ESDT. And so once that budget came out, the recommendation was made by the finance department at the time. Robin's probably looking at me strangely when I'm talking about this, but it got paid or should get paid?
Paid out of another fund?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get paid somewhere else.
That's just a
good.
cleanup.
Okay, that's all.
I can spend 3.2 if you want me to. Actually, I really can't. Not in a month. I really can't, as much as I like to say I could.
And that's all I have.
Any other questions? Alderman Gould?
I do have a question about the bridge replacement, Memorial Park Bridge replacement. So you indicated in your response that because of the nature of it being in the floodplain, that it's a more complicated process. Do we need to have, I mean, is there, this is for the replacement costs of it? What are the costs to design?
That's what got approved by Public Works and the board this year.
Oh, that's right.
We're doing the design work now.
Okay, that's
And
right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. We kind of switched. We used the design money, we used money for this year for design, and next year we'll put in.
And in your opinion, how, I know that there's been some pieces and parts that have been repaired on that. You know, how much longer do you feel that is going to be able to be maintained and utilized?
The bridge?
This bridge, the current bridge.
We'd like to get it done early next year. It's getting close to the end of its useful life. I think we continue to make repairs on it that we don't feel like it's unsafe, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
But the quicker we can replace it, the better for making sure that we're not going out there on a weekly basis, checking, making sure that we needed, shore up anything, things like that. So it is a project we feel important about getting done early next year.
Okay. And then just as a general comment that I had made, again, we had talked about it, I think, at the last meeting for Public Works. I think I'd like to see some bit of planning and vision for the combined area. I know that they're separate parks technically, but they're so close in proximity that a bit of a unified vision for that. And I know we had some of that done during the 2015 master plan, but a lot of things have changed since then. So I think an updated vision for that area, including the skate park, knowing that was something that, you know, was high on the residents list
Now,
in
as we
2015.
discussed, it's a valid point because our park system has been completely reimagined with Brentwood Bound. And so some of the things that we looked at 10 years ago, well, not 10, about 8 years ago at this point for the master plan, was done in a scope where we weren't looking at that 32 acres of green space. So there's a couple things we could do, and we can take this to Public Works and discuss this more, is look at just different areas, because not only are we looking at Brentwood Park and the sports complex, obviously, and then you're talking about the Memorial and Hanley, but we also have a plan for Rogers Greenway, which also affects Broughton Park. And I know we've had some questions come about the playground in Broughton Park, and part of it is we have this beautiful plan that would rip apart Broughton Park and remove it, or move it, relocate it, just, so, I mean, those are all valid questions that should probably be discussed. It's, do we want to look at it individually, or do we want to maybe look at a whole new master plan?
Yeah, I think that when we get to budgeting year over year, when we start looking at things individually, it becomes kind of a whack-a-mole, whatever is most in disrepair and needed to be replaced versus here's our projected plan and, expenditures over a goal. And then you can adjust as things come up. But right now it seems to be, and I know I'm not saying that as a knock, you're doing a wonderful job. I just think that it's so big of a task that you tend to start to get isolated in the focus, so.
Yeah, and
Just a
that's what we
comment.
discussed. I mean, we try to kind of look at park by park and as we move on, but things do pop up that we need to repair, especially as things get to the end of their useful life. So one of the things we talk about, that timing aspect of, hey, we should do this project next year because we've done everything else. And there's some human elements that we talk about when we do our CIP too. So, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Alderman Tice?
So one more question. I just want to confirm that the planning of, or the spending of the money for the proposed new combined building in for Parks and Rec and Public Works, that will be fully discussed before
Oh,
the money
absolutely.
is spent. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would echo again what Alderman Gould just said about the parks planning. A lot of stuff's come up. The thing I hear most about from residents over and over and over is pickleball, pickleball, pickleball. We want pickleball. I don't even think that was a thing in 2015. It may not be the top priority for Brentwood, but it's what I hear over and over. So I think what Alderman Gould said about revisiting some of the priorities, since the parks look so different than they did when that plan was done, makes a lot of sense for a different committee. That's all.
I love planning. It guides us and moves us forward, so you won't get argument out of me.
So I should ask, I don't believe there's any money for another revisiting of the Parks Master Plan next year. I thought maybe I had heard you say, Eric, that once Brentwood Bound is done, then we would take that on. So I'm not hearing that you all want us to speed that up at all, correct? Oh,
Well, I'd be comfortable if we think about that to be like a 2023 project, because there's
Exactly.
a lot the city's doing right in the
Right.
next year for Brentwood Bound. That would,
And obviously,
okay, so 2023.
and we can
yeah,
bring this, we can have a further discussion on Public Works.
Right, okay.
Anything else? Thank you, Eric.
So to wrap up the meeting, because I want to be respectful of all your time, we do have Chief Cottrell and Whitney Kelly here to respond to any follow-up questions you may have for the 2 additional positions. They did take it to Public Works Committee, and there was unanimous support for the fire marshal position by that committee. There was a lengthy discussion on the multidisciplinary inspector, and I think the conclusion was to go with the chair's recommendation. Let's leave it as a, and I believe Alderman Tice agreed, let's leave it, the budget for it in the proposed budget and direct staff, possibly not to do anything until the board is comfortable with us moving forward. But additional information was presented, conversation was had. Whitney, am I summarizing the next steps accurately? Yes. Okay. So those 2 positions would stay in the budget. So unless you have additional questions for them, they're here to answer that.
I don't. Thank you.
So the item on that agenda is redistricting. Whitney has been looking at the population for the different wards. We've also had Alderman Weggie also looking at that for us.
Of course.
However, I believe the recommendation needs to come from staff. So Whitney, can you come up to the podium? We are going to be recommending moving census blocks from one ward to another ward. However, the challenge for us is that the deadline to provide this new redistricting map to the St. Louis County Board of Elections is December 6th. The only way for us to be able to meet that deadline is to schedule special meetings of the board and of this committee, because that usually comes to this committee with a recommendation to the full board. Do you want to just talk about the changes that you're recommending? And interestingly enough, they're moving the calendar up early this year, the filing. So filing starts December 7th and ends, I think, December 28th. Last year, it was through January, 12th or 13th. So there's not enough time, even if one were to get this to the Board of Elections, for those who might want to file, and I think the mayor expressed this concern to me as well, that what if I used to be in Ward 1, and now because of this redistricting, I'm in 2? And if I had had sufficient time to know, then I could have filed for 2, and not 1. So we would also want to hear, is it all right to keep the ward boundaries as it is, to give us and the board a little bit more time to digest this rather than rush it through, and then maybe do nothing for the April election, but be ready for the April 2023 election. So those are things we want you to consider. Whitney, if you want to talk about what you're recommending, we move.
Yes. Based upon my review of all of the census tracts, we have a difference between the highest and lowest of a 10.2%. The city attorney has said that we have to get it under 10%. And I'm just trying to remember how this, and so, can't figure out. I can't pull up the map. So I did a preliminary map. We would move the south side, we would move two of the old census tracts, 30112 and 30115, and the south of, I believe that's hold on.
Is this map on our, are you
So
referring
you
to
No,
the
have-
I will bring,
map,
I
or-
will,
The current map is on the city website, but the new map, we are working with Gonzalez to put that together. So I don't believe it's going to be ready in time for the board meeting tonight.
Well,
but
no,
as
it's
soon
just
as
if
we
she's
have
looking
it-
at a map and referring to it,
yeah.
I don't
and,
really has.
So let me send it to,
the connector.
so the current map is on the city website. And if you go under zoning district, no, that's not it.
Search Brentwood Mo ward map, it comes up
Um,
in Google.
So I'll just try to describe it in general. So there were two blocks that were west of Brentwood Boulevard that was part of Ward 2, and then the rest of that block, the rest of that street was part of Ward 4. And I'm suggesting 1, right. So I'm suggesting moving all of those to Ward 3. Then the north side of just south of Lely, I think. I could come up there if that's helpful. Would also get moved to Ward 2.
So the 3003 section?
Yeah.
Were you able to find the ward map? Has everyone else been able to
I'm
find
looking
it?
at, so I'm looking
Okay.
at Eulalie, that's Ward 2. Or what, like,
There was, hold on.
Why don't you go up to them? Yeah.
So I was looking at this street here, moving it to Ward 2. Have any residents, but I just thought for consistency's sake, and that would get us a slight difference.
what do you, when you say
The
throw?
rest of Promenade.
Oh, that whole section?
This
The whole big block, okay.
yeah.
So the promenade, there was discussion, Alderman Shelton, do you remember the discussion with former Alderman Tom Kramer? His position back then in 2012 was that all of Brentwood Square should be moved to part of Ward 4. And so I'd forgotten about that, but Alderman Weggie reminded us, and there's no people there. So we would just move that to part of Ward 4 unless, you know, the board has a position on that. I don't know what the current aldermen from Ward 4 think about that. Don't, okay.
I mean, there are no voters there.
There are no voters there. He just
what are
felt
the-
that he was representing them, and so we should move it to Ward 4. I think the entire board is representing all commercial districts in this town.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that reasoning council is just as much in favor of keeping it as is. I mean, because the concern ultimately is voters, right? Like, you know.
Are you representing anyone? You're not.
Yeah, like,
Right now, there are no voters there,
I
living there.
don't think anyone's gonna move into Nordstrom.
They try. So,
Webby had recommended the village of Brentwood be moved into Ward 4.
yes.
When I did that calculation, it adds 400 residents to that Ward 4. So that gets us way off.
Our recommendation is a little different from
Yeah, it
Alderman
just seems
Wegg.
like a solution
Yeah.
in search of a problem.
Yeah.
Alderman Gould.
I have a question about, so I understand, I guess, some of the potential of combining some of the Ward 1 and Ward 2 in the one block there that we already have in Ward 3, half of the street. But I don't agree with at all Litzinger being split up, that little sliver. And that I think, that's a little neighborhood that they all walk around and I think that's not, that doesn't make any sense at all. I think if you look at, I would like it to be looked at on, you know, whether or not, you know, the addition of the blocks, the two blocks that you're trying to combine. I think the other little notch that's a little bit awkward or weird within Ward 3 and Ward 2 is around, you know, Mark Twain Elementary. So especially the one street that is, what is that, Florence, that's split, I believe. Yeah, Florence, one side's right at the corner of Florence and Dorothy, those couple of blocks, Florence, Joseph, Henrietta. You know, I mean, I think if you look at where it makes the most sense and the number of residents, rather than two little notches that are kind of weird, I'd look at some of those numbers and see what that looks like. Yeah.
I can look at it, it's just then it leaves.
No, there's weird ones everywhere, but I think that weird little key one that you're talking about at Litzinger, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Okay. Yeah, I can look at those.
This is the kind of feedback we're asking for, and so we'll go back to our engineers and ask, well, first of all, Whitney will recalculate the numbers and see whether that percentage gets us to a standard deviation that's less than 10. But at the same time, we're gonna be going back and forth, making these changes based on other comments that you all might have, or even the other aldermen who are not here. So in terms of time frame, is there some sort of agreement that, and I understand that we're late in starting this and getting this done. So is it fair to say that we should continue to work on it instead of trying to schedule a special meeting to meet that December 6th deadline? That's really the question.
Well, so if we waited, so potentially, so then we wouldn't, do we have any, like, start at high level and do we have any state requirements that we have to have the maps drawn by X date such that an election would be implicated?
That's the deadline from St. Louis County Board of Elections. However, when I talk to other cities, because there continues to be discussion with their city administrator, like what was recommended is not what the board is agreeing to. So they know, example Rock Hill, that they will not meet that that deadline to change it. But she's also telling me, that's the only example I have, that their population has changed in each ward as far back as 1948, and they've never redistricted. So, since I've been here in Brentwood, so 2010 census, we did a redistricting in I think it was 2012. I don't know why, but we had a little longer to implement it. So we are supposed to, yeah, we are supposed to. And if we can't meet the deadline for this year, for the April election, there's another deadline that we have to meet for the upcoming election.
I guess my concern is, I don't want to be disadvantaging someone who, like, I would have run against Alderwoman Tice, and now I have to run against Alderwoman Sims. Or, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know as a practical matter, you know, that's,
Or the other question is if somebody runs and gets elected in a certain ward and then a year from now, we redistrict and they happen to live in that space that now is another ward.
There are
Like
a
that
number of
becomes
challenges,
a challenge.
difficulties with this.
are there different, I mean, if we let this election go, and then, I guess we're ready for we redistrict, because I don't like having my back to the wall. I feel like this is an important thing that we need to, you know, get right. You know, and then it's ready to go by the next election, at least
We'll be ready then.
we'll be ready.
Right.
I suppose, I guess the risk is that someone may win. What happens if, you know, someone runs against me, they win? I mean, I'm going to say I think my house is safely in Ward 2. But someone runs against me, they win, and then lo and behold, like, when the maps are redrawn, they no longer
Right.
live in Ward. What happens then?
I guess they don't get to refile
But
for that
do they
ward.
lose their office
They would.
immediately?
They
Like,
would.
I mean, I would think so.
I mean, I haven't talked to Kevin, but just from a common sense point of view, I think they would.
This is a little academic, but not all the way, all the woman case.
Well, my comment to that is that it seemed like one of the things in the stuff that Kevin sent us was that you look at who the incumbent is. So if it was a different incumbent, then you might not district out that section, and you might draw the lines a little differently if you're doing it in a year. So I don't want to cram this through, but every other city's doing this. This is going on all over the country. Everybody has to do this.
Yes.
I sort of think we should do it, and like, I know we were late getting it from the federal government. The whole system has slowed down, but every other municipality and state government and federal government is dealing with this, and all the different states are all dealing with this, and I think we should just deal with it.
Okay, so we can schedule additional meetings.
I mean, I hate to do that,
In
'cause
interest
what-
of time, I mean, I don't, like,
Gonna
I mean, what if we
Thanksgiving.
can we do a work session? I mean, the board is
I
gonna have
thought
to
about
vote.
that
I mean,
too.
maybe if
Absolutely.
we can short circuit some of this and
Yes.
maybe have it seems to me, since all of the board is going to have
Yes.
to be concerned, I don't need to,
You're right.
you know, if we can jump over, have a committee meeting, and then maybe we have 2 meetings of the board.
Sure.
That'd be my preference on something like this.
Okay. I can talk to the mayor and ask him. We'll ask the other members that aren't here, and then see if there's agreement for a special meeting to take this on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might as well have the full 8. I mean,
Yeah,
that would,
okay.
that'd be mine.
And what we would do is we would notice the meeting in such a way that even though it's a workshop, if there's an agreement on what the new ward boundaries would be, that motion could be, with the resolution, approved at the workshop and allow us to submit this in time to St. Louis County Board of Elections.
and I'd just add, if it's a special meeting, it would at least be a minimal amount of PR that would go out, like, we're having a special meeting, just talk about redistricting.
Right.
So if you have comments, come and talk,
meeting.
so.
Sure. Okay, we can do that. Thank you for,
Yeah, works, let's have the whole board share some of this burden of special meetings. I mean to spread it around.
Spread it around.
So, okay, so you don't need, you have direction, you don't need.
I'm good.
Got it, all
Thank
right,
you.
so, I was on, where'd you go? 6-0. Oh, I've lost my agenda. What is now,
So minutes approval.
okay, yeah, because I have the map. The next item on the I don't have board docs up anymore. I guess the next,
Consent agenda for minutes approval is next.
okay, has everyone had an opportunity to, review the minutes? Do we have any changes or amendments? Any objection to approving by acclamation? All right, seeing none, they'll be approved. I'm just not.
Citizen comments.
All right, next item on the agenda, citizen comments. Is there anyone in the gallery that would care to address the committee? Seeing none, I don't think there's anyone online virtually. So then is the next item a motion to adjourn? Okay, enter a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Oh, well, I guess and then our next meeting is Thursday.
Yeah.
What is, I probably should have asked